before we go to our first callers, some things have happened in the last month, and there's some things that will happen in the coming month, including an election, and we will talk with the governor about that. But he and I were briefly chatting off the air about the dismissal, if you will, of Coach Ed Orgeron. I know you became friends. You were there during the championship ride just 21 months ago. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I appreciate his contributions to LSU and to the state of Louisiana, both with respect to the football program and otherwise. And I am very mindful that just 21 months ago we were celebrating a national championship with I don't think there's any doubt, the finest year that the LSU football program's ever had, and really that any program has ever had. And the last couple of years have been really tough. But I appreciate his contributions and the fact that the way that he and athletic director, have worked through this. I think he and Scott have issued very positive statements about one another and about the university. And so I wish him nothing but the best of luck. And I'm glad he's going to coach out the remainder of the season. And hopefully we can win all the remaining games.
Mm-hmm. And for those who think the governor is the highest paid public official in the state, Coach O earns $9 million a year, and Governor Edwards earns slightly less than that.
Just a little bit less.
A little bit less.
Yeah.
877-217-5757 for Governor John Bell Edwards. James in Longview, Texas. James, you're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Well, good afternoon, Jim, and good afternoon, Governor Edwards.
Thank you, James. Appreciate you calling in again.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing from you, Governor. I was reading on the news where our friend, former Governor Edwin Edwards, who recently passed away, his family is seeking a place for him at the, quote, governor's graveyard near Huey Long's grave, and I fully support that. And I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on that subject in general, please.
Well, thank you, James. And there was news today that State Representative Eccles out of Monroe is looking to introduce legislation that obviously hasn't been drafted. I haven't read it, and I can't say I support it, but it's an interesting idea where any governor, and I think past, present, or future, could potentially be buried on the Capitol grounds, and I'll be looking at that. Obviously, as the state's only four-term governor, Edwin Edwards, I think, has a special place in our state's history. And so if there's a movement to have him interred there at the Capitol grounds, I would certainly be inclined to support that. I don't think it's very clear right now exactly how that would have to happen. I think Huey Long was buried there pursuant to a resolution, but it seemed like it might have been only in the Senate. It didn't even involve the House of Representatives. And then, of course, Representative Eccles' bill, I will just say this for the record now. My intention is to be buried not soon, if possible, and next to my wife. So I don't think that I will be a candidate for burial there on the Capitol grounds.
Although they could put spouses in there too,
if they chose to, but that could become problematic too. So I mean, we'll just have to see.
Well, so you would decline that opportunity?
Yeah, I've been next to Donna since I was 15 years old. I don't want to spend the rest of eternity anywhere else.
You won't be cremated?
No, that is not my wish.
Now, I think that's what James was alluding to, is that the former governor, has been cremated now, and for those of us who grew up Catholic, at one time the Catholic Church frowned on that. Yeah,
I don't know that that's I don't know that there's an objection by the church any longer to that, but it's just not my personal preference. And I was sort of raised as a Catholic thinking that one ought not to be cremated, and maybe I just haven't overcome that yet.
Gina in Harvey. Hi, Gina. You're on Ask the Governor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Governor, and thank you for your time. I live in Jefferson Parish, and I'd like to ask you about the role the legislative auditor has in assisting the improved performance of state agencies.
All right, the legislative auditor.
Well, first of all, Gina, thank you very much for the call. The legislative auditor obviously is a very, very important position, and it is a creature of the legislature, not the executive branch. And I do think it's very important that the legislature and the people of Louisiana have access to information on how our various state and local entities are performing. And that can really only be done, I think, through audits. And I will tell you, I think the auditor, Mike Wagasback, I think he and his office do a good job of doing that. And what I try to make sure is that to the extent that I can have any influence over this, at least, that the auditor is auditing and not advocating for specific policies, but just trying to figure out whether the policies and the laws that are in effect are being performed well and in accordance with the law, and not actually taking any positions with respect to what those policies ought to be, because I don't think that's the particular role. And I'm certainly not suggesting that Mike Wagasback in his office is currently doing that, but I think at times in the state's past that has happened. But I think they play a very important role.
We have about a minute before the break, but Alondra, let's slide in Peter in Pineville. Peter, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor. Hi, Peter.
Okay. I just want to tell the governor he's done a great job. He fought an uphill battle against Bobby Jindal, and I see a complete different feel in the state right now.
All right, Peter, endorsing the governor. Governor Jindal remains a controversial fellow several years now, 6 years after he left office, and you had your differences with him when you were in the legislature.
Yeah, I did. Not personal differences, but policy differences. And Peter, I thank you very much for the call. We've worked very, very hard to right the ship financially, and I think the $1 billion surplus that was announced recently is evidence of that.
Greg in New Iberia. Greg, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, Governor. And Jim, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to get a chance to participate in your show.
Thank you, Greg, for calling.
Okay. First of all, born and raised in New Iberia, Louisiana, and moved back here from California after being there for 30 years due to the economy in Louisiana. And having 3 kids to raise, it's good to be back home. While I was there, I worked on a few projects in the solar industry and always wondered if it could be done here. And got back home about 8 years ago and started to do research to see if it could be done here. I worked alongside with UL's engineers, as well as I got with your Green Energy Task Force, Governor, to try to get advocacy as for participation for minorities and citizens in Louisiana.
Well, Greg, first of all, thank you very much again for the call. Secondly, it can be done in Louisiana, and we have investments that have already been made, and many more are being contemplated around solar energy in Louisiana. And quite frankly, this is being driven by the market. And so you have a lot of folks in Louisiana, regardless of what type of business or industry they're in, where their boards of directors are requiring them that a certain percentage of future investments will have to be located where they can have renewable energy sources for electricity, for example, solar or wind. So if we're going to continue, for example, to have chemical manufacturing and refining and other things in Louisiana as we have in the past, these new investments, they're going to have that available. And so we have seen some investments be made already, some of which is controversial. You know, I think some people are concerned that the price of land that's currently being used for agricultural purposes could be increased if the landowner received the high rentals that they would get from solar entities. I think that threat is well overblown, because they're only going to be located in areas where they're in close proximity to transmission lines and substations and so forth. But I do believe that we have to decarbonize our environment. We know in Louisiana we're affected by climate change more than any other state in the nation. And so it is something that I think ought to be part of our portfolio to a degree that we currently don't have it in place. So I do support the solar industry and want them to be able to be here in Louisiana in a robust way. It helps our environment and will secure a lot more investment going forward if they are here.
John in Jefferson. John, you're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bell Edwards. Hi, John. Good afternoon, John. Are you there? Okay, Alondra, can we see if John is there and go to the next caller, and we'll see if we have a better chance with Ray in Prairieville. Ray, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor. Hi, Ray.
Hello, Jim. Thanks for taking the call, and thank the governor for being on the program. Just a quick question. We need roads. I just got off the massive traffic jam on I-10 at college, and I realized getting taxes to pay for roads through a Republican legislature is going to be very difficult. But how much would we need to raise gas taxes to improve Louisiana roads just to be acceptable?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much, Ray. And you're right. And the area where you live in Prairieville is one of the fastest growing areas in the state as well. And the roads get particularly congested in the morning and the evening as people are moving down towards the industrial sites along the river, as you know. The good news is we do have a widening planned from the Mississippi River to the 10-12 split. So there'll be an extra lane in each direction. That's going to happen over the next few years, and that's certainly going to be helpful. But to the larger question, I think it will depend on whether the infrastructure bill gets passed that's currently pending in the U.S. House of Representatives that has already passed the Senate. There is considerable assistance there for Louisiana and other states for traditional infrastructure and other things like broadband access and so forth. And obviously, we need to do what we can to improve roads and bridges. There was a bill passed that I signed into law last session that will move funding out of the general fund over time and to the Transportation Trust Fund in order to assist. But quite frankly, we need to do more. I think everybody is in agreement with that. You may know that in 2017, I formed a task force to study the issue and make a recommendation. I accepted the recommendation that would have required a gas tax increase in order to fund better transportation. And look, it's a quality of life issue. It has to do with economic development, investment, and so forth, and safety. And so I do believe that we need to do more. But we need to focus right now on what Congress is going to do and then see what we need to do on top of that, if anything, in order to have the roads and bridges that we need in Louisiana.
As we went to the break in the previous segment, you noted the state has a fairly substantial surplus. That's always a good thing for a governor. And there are some amendments that voters will weigh in on November 13th. Hopefully people within earshot will vote. Usually these kinds of elections are low turnout, and New Orleans mayor's election is on the ballot in Orleans Parish. But, Governor, as far as those amendments, are you supportive of all of them?
I am. Amendments 1 and 2, they deal with the fiscal reform for the state of Louisiana. Number 1 would create a framework for centralized sales tax collection. We're one of the few states that doesn't engage in sales tax collection in that fashion. It is something that I support. There was a big effort to reach out to parishes and municipalities in order to get their support for this approach, because that's what had been lacking in the past. And their support was there. It passed the legislature with a 2/3 vote. And it is something that I support. Secondly, with respect to income tax, both personal and business income taxes, corporate income taxes, I do think it's important that we do what we can to trade exemptions for lower rates, and that's what this does with the FIT and the federal income tax, which almost no other state does. But when you have that in place, the federal government, and not you to a large degree, determines how much tax you collect. We actually outsource how much revenue we're going to get in Louisiana to Congress, because if they have a tax cut, we get more. If they raise taxes, we get less. We need to be in control of that of ourselves, and this is a revenue neutral way to accomplish that. And it will have less volatility in Louisiana. And so I do support both of them. I encourage the voters to take a strong look at it and ultimately to vote in favor of Amendments 1 and 2.
John in Covington. John, good morning or good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor. Hello, John.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Governor. Governor, respectfully, I'd like to ask you to stop the implementation of the mid-barataria sediment diversion and reprogram that money for less damaging projects that will produce better storm protection and also not block the expansion of the oyster industry.
What
John,
about that plan?
No, John, thank you very much for calling. Obviously, we are committed to our coastal restoration and protection program, and reconnecting the Mississippi River, and particularly its sediment, to our marsh is critical if we are going to rebuild land and actually provide that storm surge buffer to the populated areas of Louisiana. And anything that needs to be mitigated because of these projects, we will do everything we can to mitigate. But we're trying to take what used to be marsh and is now open water and return it to marsh. I have no doubt that there will be some folks who will be inconvenienced or potentially more than inconvenienced by that. But it's essential that we do it, and individuals would have to go to more traditional areas in order to get their oysters. But, we're working through that. We're making more of the state's waters available to oyster leasing than before. But I will tell you, we're going to let science decide what projects we pursue and which ones we don't pursue, and we will mitigate against all of the adverse consequences of these projects. But I think these projects are critically important. We can't have the Gulf of Mexico lapping at the base of the levees.
Thank you, John. Randy and Zachary. Randy, you're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Governor Edwards, my question to you is, how concerned are you about the upcoming redistricting, and do you believe that it should be more inclusive a process instead of an exclusive process where we can get all voters to be encouraged to vote as we elect our public officials?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Randy. I encourage all people to vote regardless, and we always should. We should encourage people to register, to vote, and then to cast an informed ballot so that they know about the various issues. If it's something that's like a constitutional amendment, and that they know about the issues and the candidates. If it's a candidate election, the redistricting can be critically important. I've always said the districts just need to be fair, so that voters decide who their representatives are, rather than representatives deciding through a convoluted process that produces irregularly shaped maps who their voters are going to be. So that's what I'm looking for, and hopefully the legislature, when it convenes early next year to engage in this redistricting, will take that into consideration, and we'll have a fair map that reflects the current demographic makeup of state of Louisiana and produces results that are consistent with the way that the state is. And if we can do that, I think we will be successful. But I do encourage people to register to vote and to vote in every election.
877-217-5757 is your Ask the Governor number. There is a line open. Joel in Breaux Bridge. Joel, good afternoon. You're on the air. Hi, Joel.
Nice speaking with you, man. One of my favorite governors of all time. I have a quick question. Well, actually, two questions, completely not related to each other. I-10, at the Henderson exit, I noticed that they spent a bunch of money in putting 3 lanes going to the Chapelai Bridge. I just wondered if there's plans to widen the Chapelai Bridge. And on the other question, the Mississippi River Bridge, is there plans in place or a timeline to maybe build another bridge across the Mississippi?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And you go straight for the costly projects, I will tell you, Joe. I do appreciate your call. So we were able to take some funding that became available to us when we took out the Garvey funds, Garvey bonds, I should say, and we were able to spend some of that on I-10 in the Henderson area, as you mentioned, which I think is going to be very, very helpful. But as you know, at least if you're eastbound there, you approach the Atchafalaya Basin, which is an elevated structure, and the cost to add lanes on an elevated structure are just gigantic. And so I cannot tell you, and what I'll do, Joel, if you'll give your number to Nick. He's online. I will get the Secretary of Transportation to give you a call, who happens to be from the Lafayette area, by the way, and he drives that way every single day. With respect to the Mississippi River Bridge, we are currently awaiting results of an effort by the federal government to tell us where that bridge needs to be.
Okay.
So that we can move forward. We don't have a specific spot across the river there, but somewhere south of the current new bridge, which is as old as I am, by the way, we will be building a bridge.
There's another half hour to go, so there is time to reach the 56th governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards. And for those of you watching this program, it's brought to you by Hometown Productions and Jerry Mayer, who's been with us since the first show in April of 2016. He's been here dutifully for every program. This is show number 67. And it was in March of last year that the governor was here, and then he was gone for a little over a year because he was taking COVID precautions. He was on the air with us, but from a remote location. And we've gone a half hour today, Governor, without talking about COVID. Does that mean things are getting better?
Well, certainly things are much better than they were several weeks ago when we were in the midst of the fourth surge, the Delta surge, which was by far the worst ever. And I'm very thankful for that. Our positivity rate for tests currently in Louisiana is a little less than 3%. It had gotten over 16% at the peak. We had over 3,000 people in the hospital at one time. Today, that number is down to 380. So we are very close to the baseline COVID numbers in terms of cases and positivity, hospitalizations, where we were before the fourth surge started, which is very gratifying because at one time we had more than 900 people per 100,000 contracting COVID over a 7-day period. And that was an astronomical number and was one that really caused a big problem with respect to our health capacity at our hospitals, for example. So yes, we are doing better. We do need more people to be vaccinated. A little more than 50% of our state has received the first dose, and the older the age group, the more likely that those people have been vaccinated, which is very important. But COVID is going to be with us for a while, and it's going to circulate primarily among the unvaccinated. Today, 83% of our cases that we reported, and we reported 495 of them, were unvaccinated. Today, out of that 380 people in the hospital, 83% of them are unvaccinated, and about 3/4 of all of the deaths in Louisiana from COVID-19 are unvaccinated. So I'm encouraging people to be vaccinated and to get boosted when you're able. And we expect some news out of the FDA and then ultimately out of the CDC in the next several days around Moderna and or Johnson & Johnson booster shots.
Have you gotten your booster shot?
I did. I did. As soon as I became eligible, I scheduled it and was boosted and gotten the flu shot the same day. And I do encourage people to get the flu shots too, because if you go to the hospital, and especially if you have to be an inpatient, and you have the flu or COVID, you tax the exact same part of our healthcare delivery system. It's the respiratory therapists, it's the ventilators, it's the same part. And so the flu shot is more important this year than in any other year, except maybe last year. But you can't do anything about what you didn't do last year. But you can get your flu shot this year, and I encourage people to do that.
And it is a time in which we are hoping things will continue to do better. It's nice to see places like Tiger Stadium nearly full. Concert venues are now operable. What was the last concert you attended?
Oh, wow. I don't. The last one that I went to that I really, really liked was George Strait. I can tell you that. George Strait. He came to New Orleans. I'm a country music person, as you know. But Donna loves music of all types, and I will accompany her to concerts, but I don't necessarily enjoy them that much.
You went with her to see James Taylor, did you?
I did. I mean, by the way, I do like James Taylor. He's good.
But for you, he's hard rock, right?
Well, he's not country. I'll just put it that way. He's not hard rock. I know the difference between James Taylor and hard rock. He's not that.
You're a George Jones guy, too.
I am.
Right? Yeah.
I am. The country music, and really, I don't think it gets better than the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Mm-hmm. The former Governor Edwards was a big country music aficionado.
Yeah, he was a personal friends with Willie Nelson.
He was.
There's some photographs at the governor's mansion of he and Willie Nelson together.
I remember in 1983 when he ran, his theme song was "On the Road Again."
On the
with
Road
Willie
Again
Nelson.
by Willie Nelson, absolutely.
877-217-5757. Let's go to John in Jefferson. John, I think we got you this time, so you have the floor, my friend, with Governor Edwards. Hi, John.
Hi, how are y'all? Thank y'all for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Sir, just Governor, I want to let you know I did not vote for you, but I do regret that decision now. I think you're doing a great job fiscally and with a lot of things, so I appreciate you for that.
Thank you, sir.
My question, y'all kind of led into it. Nice segue. I know you, on the 27th, I think you're going to be coming out with a new mandates or whatever concerning COVID and requirements. Are you going to extend the mask for K through 12 in schools? It's just kind of hard to justify seeing 100,000 screaming drunk Tiger fans 1 foot from each other on Saturday night and then having our kids wear a mask on Monday morning.
Well, John, it's a good question. It's just a little premature. I received my first briefing today about what the current situation is relative to the decision next week on what we keep in place and what we lift. But I will tell you there is a tremendous difference between an indoor setting and an outdoor setting. And Tiger Stadium, as you know, is outdoors. Schools are obviously indoors, and the vast majority of people there, not only are they unvaccinated, they can't be vaccinated. It's not available to them yet. And that makes a big difference in our analysis. Secondly, we know that there are at least as many parents who want masking in schools, or at least they have in the past, in order to feel comfortable enough to send their kids to school, as there are parents who would rather there not be masks. But if you want fewer interruptions in school and more kids in class for longer, then you've got to make sure that you don't have outbreaks. And the current CDC guidelines say that if two students are in close proximity to one another, but they're masked, then that's not a close contact, and they don't have to quarantine when one of those students tests positive. And so you have a lot less disruption to education if you do that. But even, and I haven't made a decision yet, but even if I were to lift a mask mandate, the school districts would have the option, if they wanted to keep those in place. But I'll be making an announcement. It'll either be next Tuesday or next Wednesday. But I do appreciate your comments. I would have appreciated your vote, I guess, if you'd have been able to do that. But no, we'll have an announcement next week.
Now, the education superintendent, Cade Brumley, he weighed in on vaccinations, and his approach is somewhat different than yours, and got some pushback on this. Are you in discussions with him about his approach?
Well, yeah, but that wasn't about vaccination. That was about policies related to quarantining. When, under what circumstances would students have to quarantine? And he chose to announce a policy that would allow school districts to opt out of the CDC guidelines. I do think that was a mistake. I think that when you're in a public health emergency, that absent a compelling reason to deviate from it, you need to follow the guidelines of the CDC and other public health experts. And quite frankly, if you want less disruption in school and more students present every day in person for instruction, then you got to minimize the amount of COVID that gets transmitted there. And you do that by following the guidelines. So I think he made a mistake. I don't think it was well thought out. I don't think it had been communicated in advance. And quite frankly, I don't have a clue what information he relied upon in making his decision there. And we have had a discussion. We're moving forward. He and I agree about a whole lot more things, obviously, than we disagree. And we're going to move forward.
Well, vaccinations right now for kids, how readily available? I mean, what is the rule for kids of certain ages?
Yeah, well, we don't have them for kids under 12 currently, and I know that the federal government's looking into ages 5 to 11 at a reduced amount in terms of what would be put into the shot, how much of the vaccine would be put into each shot. Well, we don't have a decision on that yet, but what I can tell you is that if you just look at all of the young people under 18 and 12 to 18, they have they've been able to be vaccinated for a while now. It's only about a third of them that have taken the opportunity that they have. We need to get that number up. Because while it is true that younger people are less likely to have a severe or bad outcome, they're nevertheless contagious once they contract the disease. And then they spread it to others, including grandma and grandpa and aunt and uncle and neighbor and so forth. And so if you have too much community transmission, which the vast majority of Louisiana does still, you can't really impact that the way you want to if COVID is rampant among the young people.
Our last caller, I think that was Nick. We lost him in the break, but he had a question about sprucing up the state capitol, that beautiful building that dominates the Baton Rouge skyline, and it's been ongoing, hasn't it?
It has, and I don't know if he meant the building itself or the grounds. Of course, the grounds, I believe, are beautiful and clean, so I assume he's talking about the building. But the the western side, the Senate side, has already been cleaned. The scaffolding has been moved over to the east side, where the House of Representatives is. And, the Capitol is a beautiful building, majestic building, the tallest state capitol in the country and the most visited state capitol in the country. But it's built out of a material that seems to darken over time as it gets dirty, and it does have to be cleaned at some interval, and that is actually ongoing as we speak. And I'm looking forward to having the scaffolding down and kind of a shiny, new-looking old building there.
Do you recall the first time you visited the Capitol?
Yeah, Ty Cobb Lanier from Kentwood was our state representative, and I was in the fourth grade and took the field trip like I think most fourth graders do, and came over and was able to visit with him. I remember that he bought our class ice cream that day. So I do remember the very first time in fourth grade that I visited the Capitol.
That probably would have been around 1976.
That's about exactly right. Yes, bicentennial year.
That's right, and there was another Edwards who was governor then.
There was, and anyway, it was quite a experience for me to be able to come over here, and I remember having a picnic lunch on the Capitol grounds, and again we had ice cream for dessert.
But when you were 10 years old, did you look up and say, I'm going to be running the joint someday?
I did not. Well, I don't know. I don't recollect that if I did. But I do remember that my dad at the time was sheriff. He had been a Edwin Edwards supporter, and they knew one another, and I had had a chance to meet him. And I thought it was neat to be in Baton Rouge and in the building where he was governor. When did you decide to try to get into West Point? I was actually in between my sophomore and junior years in high school. Knew I wanted to go in the Army. Thought I would go through ROTC, probably at Southeastern, because that's what my older brother Frank had done, and he went in the Army. And then he called me one night. He was on active duty, and he said, "Look," he said, "you ought to at least try to get into West Point and just see if that's a route that's available to you." I did. I was lucky enough to get in. Oh, well, I'll tell you. So he called me, and the next day at school, baseball coach told me that he had been contacted by the coach at West Point and asking if there was any students there who could play baseball and might be a good cadet. And so those two things literally happened within about 24 hours. So I said, well, I probably ought to try this.
Sign.
Yes.
Did you have both U.S. senators or one of them nominate you?
I had both, and I was very fortunate, and maybe with my background, it took both of them to get the Academy to take that seriously. But Russell Long and Bennett Johnston both nominated me, and I very much appreciate that to today. And every now and then I see Bennett Johnston, and I never fail to thank him.
Do you still have those letters?
I do have the letters. They're at home in Roseland.
Well, at some point, as governor, your papers will probably be displayed somewhere. Have you given any thought about where you'd like that to happen?
I have not. I've got 2 years remaining, and our hands are full with COVID, with recovering from Ida, Laura, Delta last year, and so there's so much work that has to be done. I really haven't started thinking about things like that. I suspect it'll happen at some point, but I'm just not there yet.
And I'm not going to send you down this path again, but you could run again at some point. But at this point,
the law allows it. Donna does not.
John in Metairie. John, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor. Hi, John.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Fine.
Doing fine, thank you.
My question is regarding vaccines for school-age children. The CDC has fully approved the vaccine for people ages 16 or over, I believe. And every year I have to prove to my children's school that they have a myriad of vaccines. So to me, it seems like there's no scientific reason not to require COVID vaccines for at least kids who are 16 years or older if they want to go to school. It seems to me to be merely a political decision because we know how a lot of people feel about this, and we just want to, not ruffle their feathers too much. Is there any reason why we don't mandate vaccines to go to school for COVID?
Well, John, it's a great question, and it's simply a matter of timing. So we weren't going to do it before full licensure, that full FDA authorization that you spoke of was in place. It is now in place. Once the licensure was granted by the FDA, the process was started by the Department of Health to promulgate a rule, which will simply add the COVID vaccine to the list of vaccines that are mandated for both K through 12 schools and higher ed, and it will be subject to the exact same rules. And so individuals can opt out today, or I guess their parents can opt the younger people out for certain reasons, and those will remain in place. But the COVID vaccines, as they achieve FDA full authorization, will be added to the schedule, and so that will be happening. I think over the next couple of months.
Charles in Baton Rouge. Hi, Charles. You're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Thank you. Governor, would you comment on gun violence in Louisiana and possible ways to reduce it?
Gun violence and ways to reduce.
Yeah, Charles, so thank you very much for your call. And obviously, we have way too much gun violence in Louisiana. And it is tragic, and it's in just about every community. Of course, in the more populated areas, you see more of it. And quite frankly, this is, I am so proud of our state and love our state and our people, and it's a tremendous privilege to be governor. But one of the things that most disappoints me and concerns me is that for decades now, in terms of murder rate, we've led the nation. And I've actually read books on it. Is there something about our culture? Is there something about the way we're raised? What is it? And quite frankly, I haven't been able to figure that out. But we're going to have to do something to address this, even when other violent crimes are not rising or actually decreasing. Murders continue to increase, and it's tragic. It's we ought to aspire to be better than that. And quite frankly, I don't have the answer for you on how to do that. And as it happens, just the other day, I read the article in the Advocate, and started thinking and preliminarily about who would we bring in. Or what academicians do we have in Louisiana now, or other groups, or who can we bring in to look at the issue and tell us where are we different? What may be contributing to this where we can make a positive difference? But in the meantime, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to try to raise our children in a way that we respect other people and that we respect life, and that we would not. Because some of the killings that we have and the shootings we have are over the most trivial nonsense, and it's very disheartening.
If you were traveling without an entourage assigned to protect you, as should be the case with any governor, would you feel unsafe in certain parts of the state?
I have never felt unsafe. Maybe I should have, but I haven't. And I'm talking about before I was governor, and I traveled extensively. But I guess what I know is that there are places that are less safe than they certainly ought to be. And this was exacerbated. We actually had declining violent crime across the board prior to COVID. And it didn't just happen in Louisiana. And I suspect the criminologists and the sociologists and so forth are going to be studying this for some time to come. What was it about the pandemic that caused not all violent crime, but murders to increase across the board, just about across the country? And I don't understand it.
Would this have been even worse had the unlimited concealed carry measure become law of the state?
Well, look, I don't favor that law, never have. And you know, since I was in the legislature, that bill's been presented. I've never supported it. The vast majority of law enforcement officials are against it. And we have situations today that might escalate into maybe a fist fight or something like that. But if everybody out there has a concealed weapon, then they're going to turn into gunfights, and every interaction between law enforcement and the public, the law enforcement officer is going to believe that more likely than not that person, and it just has a, I think, a tendency to cause a lot more problems than it could possibly solve, and so I don't support that. And you know, I haven't changed my position on it, by the way, and that's been my consistent position, and it will be. I won't change it next year either, or the year after.
Well, Governor Edwards, thank you for joining us for show number 67. Number 68 comes in November, and I'm sure you encourage everybody to vote. We'll be with you the Wednesday after that election. So
I do encourage everyone to vote and study the issues. And I'm asking you to please favorably consider constitutional amendments 1 and 2. I think they're real fiscal reform for the state of Louisiana.
And wherever you are, be sure to vote. Some big votes in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and all over the state. So next 17th day of November, we'll be with you right before Thanksgiving. Until then, for Governor John Bell Edwards, thanks for listening and stay tuned.